Lily stood by the window staring at the quiet street. Bathed in the soft glow of street lights, the evening was especially lonely tonight. For 5 years, she had lived in a modest house on the outskirts of the city, trying to escape her past broken relationships, lost friendships, and a constant feeling of emptiness. The house was small, but cozy. A worn sofa in the living room, a tiny kitchen and bedroom where she spent many sleepless nights questioning if this was truly all her life had become her only companion. Was a cat named Jasper, a companion she adopted about a year ago. Jasper was supposed to be her reason to get out of the house, an excuse to walk outside and breathe in fresh air, an attempt to reconnect with life. But even with him by her side, loneliness never seemed to fade. Lily often sat on the couch, absent-mindedly stroking his soft fur, feeling the warmth of his presence, but still asking herself if there was more to life than this. Jasper had become more than just a pet. His quiet companionship and unwavering presence filled her life with some meaning, and his warmth offered her comfort in the silence of the house. One evening, after a long, tiring day at work, Lily climbed into bed, scrolling aimlessly through her phone. Jasper jumped up onto the bed, curling up next to her, as he always did. She stroked his fur gently, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Do you ever feel lonely, Jasper?" she whispered to him, fully aware that he would never answer, but his presence, warm and steady, was more comforting than any words could be. Over time, their bond grew stronger. At first, she let him sleep at the edge of the bed, but eventually, he began to move closer until one night he was pressed right up against her. His warmth was a source of solace for her, and she didn't mind. It felt right, like he was protecting her from the deep, unspoken fear she held inside. But as autumn rolled in, something began to change. Jasper grew more insistent. His actions, once gentle, became increasingly purposeful. One night, when he snuggled close to her, pressing his body against hers more tightly than usual, Lily felt a shiver of discomfort. She gently pushed him away. "Jasper, that's enough," she whispered. But he just stared at her with those big, round eyes, and her heart began to race. There was something in his gaze that unsettled her, something too intense, almost human in the way he watched her. She pulled the blanket tighter around her, trying to shake off the strange feeling growing inside her every day. Jasper's behavior became more unusual. He followed her everywhere, never leaving her side. Even when she went into the bathroom at night, he would stubbornly try to lie down next to her, his body pressed close to hers, as if he needed to be as near to her as possible. At first, Lily brushed it off, convincing herself that it was merely affection. But soon she noticed how his presence seemed to make her feel strange. A fluttering sensation she couldn't explain when he lay beside her. His warmth spread over her skin, and her heart would beat a little faster. It was more than simple companionship. The realization terrified her. There were moments when she found herself wondering if he felt the same way, but the thought was far too troubling. So she quickly pushed aside, burying it deep inside her mind. It was wrong to even consider it one evening. Especially exhausted after a difficult day, Lily climbed into bed, and as always, Jasper curled up next to her. His warmth was a familiar comfort, but tonight it felt different. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, and when he moved even closer, his body pressing against hers in a way that felt deliberate, her breath quickened. The room was silent and her thoughts were a mess. What was happening? Why did she feel this way? Lily tried to ignore the feeling, but each night it grew more intense. She no longer felt safe in her own bed. The warmth she once craved now felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. It wasn't just affection anymore. It had become something else one night when she woke up in the dark. She could hear Jay breathing beside her. She rolled over to find him standing at the edge of the bed, his eyes glowing in the dark. There was something about his gaze that made her heart race, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to tell her something. The silence between them was deafening, and as she pulled the covers tighter around herself, she realized that things had changed. The strange, unspoken tension between them only grew stronger. With each passing day, the distance she had once tried to maintain both physically and emotionally was narrowing, and she found herself struggling to resist Jasper's presence. His need for closeness mirrored her own unspoken desire for connection, for something more than the loneliness that had become her constant companion. But the fear that came with this new bond was undeniable. She was terrified of what it meant, of what she was feeling, and yet she couldn't push him away. She tried to convince herself that this was just her mind playing tricks on her, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. One night, as the wind howled outside and the house was silent, Lily sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, feeling the oppressive quiet around her. Jasper lay at her feet, his head resting on her lap as usual, but tonight there was something different in his gaze. He looked at her with a quiet insist that made her heart race. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she blurted out before she even realized it. He didn't answer, of course, but the weight of his presence felt overwhelming. It was as though he was trying to tell her something that terrified her. Lily had always found comfort in his presence, but now it was as if that comfort had turned into something she couldn't control. Her feelings for him had grown far more complicated than she could have ever imagined. She realized that her attachment to him had become unhealthy, and it was suffocating her. She needed to make a change, but the thought of being alone again, of facing the emptiness without Jasper, made her feel trapped the next morning as the sun rose. Lily made a decision. She couldn't continue living like this, in this strange, oppressive limo. It was time to face the truth. She had to leave to break free from the unhealthy attachment that had formed between her and Jasper. He had become a symbol of her own inner turmoil, a reflection of the loneliness and emptiness she had been running from for so long. With trembling hands, she packed a small bag, grabbed her phone, and stepped out into the cold morning air. As she walked down the street, she could feel the weight of Jasper's absence, as if he were still with her, his presence lingering like a shadow. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The days that followed were filled with confusion and sorrow. Lily tried to find herself again, but the silence in her home, once comforting, now felt unbearable. She missed Jasper, but she knew that the bond they shared had crossed a line. It wasn't healthy for either of them, and she needed to learn how to live without him. Slowly, with time and effort, Lily began to heal. She sought therapy and started to understand that her desire for closeness wasn't wrong, but the way she had sought it had been. Jasper was just a cat, a companion who had filled a void when she needed it most. But it was time to move on. She began to rebuild her life, learning to trust others.